Hello, and welcome to another one of my recordings. Through this recording, I'm going to cover the topic of methods, also known as functions in Java. Of course, in Java, we refer to them as methods. A method essentially is nothing but a block of code created uh, to, to, to essentially carry out a very specific task. So, code for specific task. So for example, I can write a method to return the area of a triangle, or I can have a method that calculates the total of a bunch of numbers. So methods are specifically designed to be used for specific tasks, and the nice thing about them is that we write them once and we use them as many times as we want. So if I wrote a method to calculate the area of a triangle, I can definitely use it to find the area of any triangle. The nice thing about methods is that once you write them, you can easily change them, and making implementation of a method, essentially changing implementation of a method, wouldn't affect the rest of um, your program. So here's a quick example. I hope you already know about this. Notice I have a public class test max, public static void main. Of course, we said keep this in mind. This is essentially, by the way, main is just another method. And I'll talk about these qualifiers before in a few minutes. And notice the method main starts here and ends right here. It's always a good idea to essentially document your curly braces because it makes your life a lot easier uh, if you're decoding or debugging your code. So I just put that in there. So I have two variables, integer I, which is 5, and j is 2. And then I'm just making a simple if statement. If I is bigger than j, notice in this case I happens to be 5, and j happens to be 2. Of course, they're variable, so they could have any value. So if I is bigger than j, we say the maximum between them is I. Otherwise, the maximum is going to be j. So in this case, 5 is bigger than 2. Um, 5 is bigger than 2, so we say 5 is the largest value. If I just flip these two values, and I was 2 and j is 5, you'll ask, is 2 bigger than 5? The answer is no, so say, well, 5 is the maximum. You'll notice from here that finding the maximum of two numbers could easily be another method, which avoids some redundancies. So let's go ahead and say, instead of me doing if I is bigger than j, doing all my changes here, I'm going to just create a new variable, say int largest, and just say, well, largest is equal to, let's see, what did I name this thing? We could call it max. So we say largest equals to max, I comma j. This is referred to as calling a method. Notice I haven't written the method yet, but it doesn't matter. Once I do this, at least I know how to call a method. And then I'll go in and write the definition of the method in a few minutes. Okay, when you look at the syntax of this statement, the largest is just a regular variable. Any variable associated with a pair of parentheses is usually a method. You notice print line is a method, main is a method, and we also use math, some of the math methods like math.py, and although pi wasn't a method, it was a static variable, but the essentially anything, any variable that's associated with parentheses is a method. Okay, so I just said largest equals to max I and j. Uh, I and j in this case are referred to as the parameters to the method. A method, think of a method as a black box of some sort where you give it values and it comes back with another value. or it decided to perform some action. Maybe it will give you something back, or maybe it doesn't. But these parameters are the only way of communicating with the method. All right, so largest equals max I and j. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this line because I don't need it anymore. And obviously I don't need this anymore either. So notice I just got rid of the one extra print line method, which is always a good thing. And I'm saying the maximum between I and j is, oh, I should spell this correctly, although it doesn't matter. There you go. Then do it again. Largest. So I'm just saying the maximum between them is largest. So imagine largest is equal to max. Max is a function. You give it 5 and 2. It goes, does its thing, comes back, and gives you what largest equals to. Hopefully it's going to be 5. And then you display it. Pretty simple, huh? So now what I'm going to do is show you how to write the definition of this function. Well, all functions are defined inside your class. So, and I usually just put all the function definitions outside of the main, or actually after main. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's before main or after main, as long as it's not inside these parentheses, braces, you're going to be just fine. So I go right there, and I start with the word public. Public, again, we'll talk about public and private in a few chapters. So public means any object from this class can actually access this variable. Public. Static means that you only have one copy of this method, which will change, by the way, when we get to our chapter. Well, actually, chapters on object-oriented programming, which comes in a few weeks. So you say public static followed by the type of the value that the function or this method returns. So if you notice from here, at least, we know largest is going to be an integer because that's what's going to hold our value. So definitely is going to be an int, followed by the name of the method, it was max. Now here, it gets a little bit tricky because here what you have to tell Java is the definition of the variables that you're using. So I'm just going to use int I, comma, int j. Notice these parameters here, parameters in the definition, you have to define things. And most students usually make a mistake of not defining int I or int j, or some people go here and put int I, which is wrong. When you call a method, you give it values. When you define a method, you actually tell it what type of parameters it has. Okay, so I'm going to put this bracket right there, and then do my code. Essentially, I'm going to close this while I'm at it. That way, I won't get in trouble later. So this would be max. Okay. Now you know from what we just talked about that this method is essentially all this method does is a simple if statement that compares I and j, and then it gives you the value of the results. So because I can't type really fast, we've already done this, so I'm just going to grab this. I suppose I could have just copied everything, but let me just copy all of this stuff from here, and I'm going to copy it, and I'll get rid of it later, and go right there, and let's see how that goes. All right, so result is just a local variable. It's only good within the brackets of the method max. And this was our simple if statement. Notice it says if num1 greater than num2. So now you have to make a choice. We're using these variables num1 and num2. I could just use I and j, but because we want our methods to be general enough so that they don't care whether you're passing I or j or test1 or test2, all you have to do is just change this to num1, not there. I don't know where that came from. You must define the variables, finish that off. All right, so right there, I'm going to do num1, and instead of j, I'll do num2, and then if num1, oh, I think I killed my int result somehow. Int result, like that. So if num1, which is right now 5, oh, well, it hasn't been called yet, but we know it's going to be called. I'll show you how this works. So if 5, just think about this for now. If 5 is bigger than 2, if 5 is bigger than 2, result is going to be 5, which is good. Otherwise, result is going to be this. So it will be the other way around. Notice the keyword result, return. Functions or methods. Um, Methods can return a value through their name. So let's just see how this works. The program starts from here. Largest is max ij. I know what I is, I know what j is, so I'll transfer control from max over here. Notice the one-to-one correspondence between these parameters. So if you have the wrong number of parameters and the wrong type of parameters, you're going to get an error message. You're calling it with 2 parameters, you have to have 2 parameters. So here's num1, here's num2. So now it's 5 and 2. Is 5 greater than 2? Yes. So result equals to 5. And then of course we won't get to the else. We come out here and it says return result. So it's going to return 5. So this whole thing now is now equal to 5. And what's largest equal to? 5. And it says, hey, here's the maximum between I and j is this. So if I go ahead and compile this thing, and when I run this, it says the maximum between 5 and 2 is 5, which is the correct answer. And we just saw how to write a method. Now let's say, well, suppose I say, I go in here and say I, j, and I. Just do a silly thing like that, where the number of parameters aren't going to match. And notice it's telling me that max I, j, I, int, comma, int. And then when you call it, you have 3 ints, and that essentially tells you that the actual and the formal argument list differ in length. By the way, we call these things actual argument lists or actual parameters because they actually have a value right there. And these are usually called formal or dummy parameters because they don't have a value till they're called. Okay, so let me go put this back in there. And if I compile this, of course, it will work. Now, what do you think would happen if I went in, did something like this? If I say int test, and then say test is equal to max 78 comma 87. Well, let's say 89. Okay. So, and then I'm going to say I'm just going to print out. So right now, test is going to be calling max function with 78 and 89. So it comes out here. So num1 and num2 will be 78 and 89. Is 78 bigger than 89? No. So result is going to be 89, and it returns 89. So now I know the maximum test score is 89. So I could just say the maximum. So I'll just say the maximum test score is plus test. There. So that's it. Notice I called the function, I wrote the function once, and I repeated it as many times as I want to. So let's say, let's run that, control 2. So the maximum test score is 89. Of course, the nice thing is that you can also have input where you ask the user for input the values, and I hope you know how to do that. All right, well, since we're here, let's also find the minimum or the lowest of these values. I'm just going to go here and say int lowest. And as you might guess, I say lowest is equal to, well, it's going to be a function of which I'm going to call it min. And let's give it I and j again. Okay, so I'm going to find the lowest of I and j. All right, so we're going to assume that min is going to do its thing. I'm just going to copy this and paste it right there. So if this works. So lowest is the minimum of I and j. So we're going to say the minimum between I and j is lowest. Again, same mechanics. Lowest is equal to min. Java is going to look for a method named min. And if it doesn't find it, it will give you an error message. So let me just show you what happens. Notice what's going to happen is that it says min, oh sorry, it says method min int comma int cannot find symbol. Well, all that tells you is that you haven't defined this method. Well, what's the difference between min and max? Not much. Instead of checking for greater than, I'll just check for less than. So see how easy it is to just grab all of this. And again, when you copy paste, always be careful. Make sure you make all your changes. I'm going to make this min, change this to min, and these two obviously don't change, don't care. And this is just going to be that. That's it. That's all we need to do. So when I run this thing, it's going to say the minimum between 5 and 2 is 2. Remember, the maximum between 5 and 2 is 5. I just wrote the program with two methods, public static max, public static min, and we're good to go. Now, this was an example of a method that returns value. We also have methods that do not return values. Of course, they could do a lot of things, but they just don't, their name wouldn't be associated with a value. And those are referred to as void functions or void methods. And void methods, one of the things I like to do with void methods is maybe create like a menu or some instructions or something like that. So a bunch of print statement that you want to repeat. You could keep calling it any way you want. So I'm going to go right here and guess it doesn't matter where I put this. Right here I'm going to say, actually I like to have all my variable definitions in one place. So let me just grab this, and this is just a better style, by the way, to have all your variable definitions at the beginning of your code. And let's just grab this one too, Control X. This way you create a little variable dictionary, and it's pretty easy to find all your variable definitions. Right here I'm going to say display introduction. Oh, how about just say introduction, I guess. Introduction. All right. Notice again, I put the pair of parentheses. How many parameters am I passing to introduction? None. So you still have to put the pair of parentheses. And again, remember, all I'm doing here is I'm calling a function. Just keep calling the function. Calling a method without parameters. Again, it could also have parameters, and I'll show you an example of what we call overloading in a few minutes. All right, so here's a call. Here I'm calling a method with parameters. If I compile this, you know I'm going to get an error message because Java is going to look for a method named introduction in here, and obviously can't find it. So let's go ahead and write this method. Again, where do I put my cursor? Right before the main, or I mean right before this end of the class test max. So of course the order doesn't matter, where you put it, where you type it doesn't matter. So there's no order there. So I say public static, I can spell static, followed by the keyword void, and we named it introduction. Remember, no parentheses. Again, this is by the way we call the header of a method. It just tells you quickly about the name of the method, what type of parameters it takes, and what it returns. Okay, so I'll do that. I go here. Again, what do you do right away? Type it in. Type your ending curly bracket and just write the name of your method. Again, that's just good for documentation. So I go in here and remember I said all I want to do is a bunch of print statements. So I'll say system.out.println. I'll go in here. Again, you could ask user for input. You could do anything you want in here. It's just a method is really a program within a program. So you can do anything you do within a main program in here also. So I do something like welcome to my program. And then probably you'd want to do something like, well, what does this program allow you to do? Again, this is what I just want to, I don't want to kill too much time. My program, if you have input, you can say This program will ask you for input, etc. Again, just some introduction and what it does. And let's say that's it. Again, you can do anything you want. So I'm just going to do this, run this. And notice it says, welcome to my program. This program will ask for input, etc. So the the output of the program or the output of this method appeared there. Now, notice how nice it is. Let's say there's a problem with this introduction. It just doesn't work. Well, you can, or let's say you have a lot of stuff that you just don't want to display or do. So notice what happens. If I go here, comment this line out, this it's just like I never have that extra step. So if there's a knowing output that you want to leave till the last minute, you write the program and then you write the methods and then you compile. You do that. All right. All right. So I'd like to keep the introduction. Now, one thing that your book talks about is the concept of overloading. So I'll just write this a little bit right here, maybe, because overloading essentially implies that you can write many methods with the same name, but with different signatures. Now, the signature. Essentially, the signature of a method is not it's just a fancy word for the type and number and order of your parameters. So notice I said type, not the name. So a parameter list int num1, num2, and int num1, int num2, and int num3 are going to be different signatures because the first one has 3 parameters, this one has 2 parameters. So notice how introduction is like this. So let me do something like this. I could just say introduction, let's do this. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to say string MSG, that's a message or whatever. And then I'm going to say introduction MSG. Now notice that it's the same name of the same method name, except that now I'm passing it a parameter. This is what I mean by overloading. You have the same name, introduction, but different parameters. Of course, if I compile this thing, it's going to complain. It's going to say, well, you gave me a method without parameters, named introduction. Well, you didn't give me a method without with parameters. So I'm just going to show you. So if I do, so notice there is a error message. It says, you're calling me with this, but you told me that the function didn't have arguments. So what's the fix? Semi-obvious. You go in and actually create another function named introduction with a parameter. What type of parameter? A string parameter. All right, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste because really they're kind of the same, but they could be different, by the way. But at least the overall idea is the same. So I go in here and put in string s. I guess s is a good name. And instead of saying print line, welcome to my program, maybe I'll just want to say s. I want to get rid of all of that. Right? So this program or this method, all it does is just prints whatever you gave it. Okay? So let's go into here and what was the value of message? Nothing. Well, let's right before here. Let's go in here and say message equals hello there, right? /n. How are you doing? Of course, remember this is a string, so you can add other strings to it. You can ask input for a message. I'll just show you what's going to happen is if I did this and I call introduction with MSG, it's just going to grab whatever I gave it and take it in, and all this does is just prints it. All right, so let's compile. And notice I'm still going to keep this introduction, and then it's going to call this introduction. Okay, let me just do this, a couple of /n's in there, just for readability. Intro 2. All right, so you see where it says hello there, how are you doing? Well, that's the result of calling introduction with this. Welcome to my program is the result of calling introduction without any parameters. Okay, well, let's just write one more. I guess doesn't hurt. Can I do something like this? Can I say, let's see, I'm gonna go in here. This is the end of my code. By the way, all the other parts of the program is still working exactly the same way. Here I'm going to say introduction. I'm going to give it, again, I can pass it anything you want, anything you like. So hello, comma, 5. All right. Now notice now I'm calling a method introduction with a message with an integer 5. And again, all I want to do is I want to maybe repeat uh, printing hello this many times. By the way, before I go on, notice the difference between min and max. Min and max are methods that return values. So we always put the return value inside a variable. But methods that don't return a value should not be used in an assignment statement because they don't have a value to be returned. So, all right, now obviously if I compile this, I'm going to get an error message because I don't have a method with 2 parameters. Okay, let's go ahead and create one. So let's just borrow this code again and enter, go back, alpha B, oops, control V, string S. Remember this thing, the way I'm calling it has a string and an integer. Okay, so I say string S, comma, int, I don't know, n maybe. And all I'm going to do is write a little loop here. So I say for int I equals to 1 to I less than or equal to n, I plus plus, so that's a regular loop. And I'm just going to print s n times. So, so obviously it's just going to print hello 5 times for me. So let's see how it works. This is it. Hello, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, imagine instead of printing hello, you could print somebody's name, or you could print a message, or use your imagination to see what else you could do. All right, so I think I'm almost done. I hope I kind of gave you a good an overall introduction, or actually this would be a review because you all are already working on using methods in Java. But hope if there were any issues with methods, this helps resolve them. I will go ahead and put this on Canvas, and I'll also put this file on Canvas next to the recording. I hope this was helpful. Goodbye.